And we're back. And this time we have one hell of a panel with amazing experts from the industry. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves, starting from the moderator. Emily, go ahead, please.
Hi, my name is Emily. I'm a co-founder of ChainSecurity and the head of sales. I'm non-technical, so we have amazing experts and me.
Hi, my name is... can you hear me from this? Sorry. Okay, good. They almost got robbed of a joke. Okay, good. So, hi everyone, my name is Bogdan. I'm one of the co-founders and CTO at Tenderly. For this panel, I'm just a warm body filling a seat for someone who actually knows something about security.
Hello, I'm Pietro. I'm a blockchain engineer at ChainSecurity, where I do smart contract audits.
Hi, I'm Brenda. I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders of Tellor. We're in Oracle.
Hi, I'm Brad Harrison. I head up Venus Labs. We work on Venus Protocol, which is a lending protocol on about 4 networks.
And with that being said, let the panel begin.
This is actually a correct way to do the intro. With
Yeah, great MC. I mean, what are you doing next week? All right, so I wanted to introduce this in a bit of a personable, relatable way. I'd like to ask you, one time you had a security scare or a security incident that you want to share with us. Maybe Bogdan, you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to share both because both of them are short. I don't know if anybody here knows what request.link is. It was used a couple of years back where if someone doesn't give you their wallet address, you can put money in, send them the link, and then they can pull funds from it, or they can request funds from you via QR code, and you can do something. I got phished, basically, for tickets for a Pendulum drum and bass concert in London. For some reason, I thought the guy will send me a PDF with the ticket. That didn't work. So that's a phishing thing that happened. And then for the scare, I was actually changing my hot wallets and cold wallets recently. And even though I have been in the space for the past 6 years, I wear an Oura ring. And for 2 hours, my heart rate was like at 130 or 140 consistently because of address poisoning and everything else that people are doing on Etherscan, and it's definitely not fun. So that's a scare, and that's a fuck-up on my side.
Did you end up going to see Pendulum or no?
No, I went very sad to Fabric, actually alone, because my friends only wanted to see Pendulum. So I went to Fabric alone.
Right?
Yeah.
Pietro.
So on one occasion, after lunch at the office, I go back to my laptop. I start working, and I see my mouse moving by itself. So of course, I start panicking. I start opening terminals and Googling how do I list all devices that are connected to my computer, because I thought like a hacker had a virtual device set up to control my interfaces. As I open the terminal, I hear some laughing behind me, and it was my colleague who set up a Bluetooth mouse on my screen, and that was it, actually. It's actually one of my recurring nightmares to get hacked. So I wake up quite often, actually, shivering because I'm using my computer in my dream, and things just start working bizarrely. Yeah.
Yeah, there's not much stress at ChainSecurity, right? Brenda.
Yeah, so I started learning Solidity in 2018, like in February, and then by May, I started pushing some code, GitHub and doing deployments. And so while I was doing that, one of the times, I'm doing deployments, so obviously I have a private key, and I just pushed my private key straight onto GitHub. Obviously, it was a deployment address, so it didn't have that much ETH, but it still, till this day, haunts me. Like every time I'm doing anything, first thing I look at is the git ignore is there, and make sure that it's there. And obviously, we have like the ENB file now separate and stuff. But back then, I feel like it was a lot of hacky ways of doing things, and yeah, that was a real nightmare. So, but a little one.
This one that hit close to home for me was not a little one. So Venus was one of the few major lending protocols, or if only to list Terra as collateral.
Oh.
I even hate saying the word Terra still. It's like, when can we stop saying Terra or Luna? But an important lesson for everybody to learn. So that vulnerability resulted in low 8-figure lossage that has since been cleared from the protocol, but it stemmed from the way that the Chainlink Oracle was configured, because the Chainlink price actually, the way that they served it up, would bottom out at $1. And we all know that even $1 was too expensive for Luna. So it allowed somebody to come in and borrow a lot more value against that non-existing collateral. Yeah, lesson learned, and we've had that tattooed into our soul and memory permanently.
So we're going to talk a lot about Oracle soon, but before that, there's some really interesting dynamic here. So on this side, we have the security people with Tenderly, with Pietro, who's my colleague from ChainSecurity. And on that side, we have the protocols with Venus and Tellor. I mean, Tellor is an Oracle, but also a protocol. And specifically, Venus got, let me tell you how many audits. They got 8 audits from OpenZeppelin, 11 from QuantStamp, 21 from PeckShield, 24 from Certic, 2 from Coderina, 1 from Cantina, 2 from Pessimistic, and more. So this is maybe one extreme of the spectrum, a very, very audited protocol, but I don't think you're on the rec leaderboard, so maybe that works. And then we have Tellor that kind of started, I think, more bootstrapped and kind of found maybe creative ways to ensure their security. So I would kind of like to dig a little bit in these topics. Maybe, Brad, if you want to start, maybe can you tell us a bit more about what is Venus and why do you think you needed that many audits?
Sure. So Venus is a lend and borrow protocol. You can come and collateralize about 20, 25 different types of digital assets to borrow against. You can do this on Ethereum mainnet, Arbitrum, BSC, and it's really basically the same types of mechanics if you're used to Compound or Aave. So it's algorithmic. The interest rates fluctuate with supply and demand. So yeah, there's a lot of audits, and part of that is a function of how the dev team has been shipping to Venus. So with some other lending protocols, you get big monolithic release cycles. So for example, I think Aave hasn't released a new version in 3 years or something like this. At Venus, the releases are smaller as a way of mitigating risk, and that kind of inflates the number of audits. But generally, for any shipment that goes out, we like to have 3 to 5 audits, depending on the criticality of what that code is. So nothing will go to mainnet, nothing will go live unless there's redundant audits by multiple teams, different types of audits. So audits from audit agencies, but also open audits like Coderina. And this has helped us stay safe. For the past couple of years. There hasn't been a major incident since 2022. We want to keep it that way. And I think big audit investment is definitely part of that.
Brenda, what would you have to say to this?
I wish I had his budget, for starters. We've had several audits for Tellor, but we were operate closer to how we do big releases. Like when we release, it's like it's going to be the next version. So we don't do as many audits as you do. We do make sure that the protocol is secure, but we also don't deal with customer funds as much. We can't have an effect on them because we are an Oracle. So a lot of our efforts go really into the game theory behind how we operate, and then also having a lot of internal infrastructure and procedures to make sure that we take care of a lot of the low-hanging fruit that we don't want to, pass over to a very expensive auditor. So we have checklists that we go through when we deploy, checklists that we go through when we are actually developing anything. We actually have, a lot of testing that goes into it, and a lot of little step-by-step instructions for every one of our developers. In the past, it used to be just 2 developers, and now that we've grown, we obviously want them to follow a certain pattern so that we can make sure that there is a certain level of professionalism and security within the company before we go out and pay. But I also don't have the budget that you have, probably.
So if we have here in the room some, new startups, what advice could you give to them? How can you create this security level on a small budget, basically?
Yeah, so I go back to the checklist. One of the main things that we do within our protocol now, it's we have, I guess you guys call it War Room, whatever, War Room Tuesdays, where we actually go through and as a team try and figure out how to attack our own system and then give it a shot. And then from that, we either create, most of the time it's just monitoring tools that we can sort of, because we can't really change the protocol at this point, but we can monitor it so that we can actually jump into action if something happens. When you are really a startup, obviously, like save up for that first audit. It's going to be necessary, but there are a lot of things that you can do within your developers. Make sure that you test everything. There's got to be unit testing. There's got to be end-to-end testing. There's got to be proper comments. There's got to be. I don't know that everybody has economists in their teams. I'm really lucky that my background is in economics, and one of my co-founders, Nick, is also an economist. So a lot of the game theory we can play out ourselves, and that's how we came up with our economic incentives and our infrastructure and design for Tellor. But that is something that can be very expensive if you outsource, but it's also something that you can learn. Obviously, once you go through the audit, make sure that if your tokenomics need to be looked at as well. If that's a big aspect of your protocol. I think it goes back to just processes and procedures within the company. For us, even the deployment process, we have like 2 people looking at it, making sure that there's bytecode checks and after you deploy, and making sure that everything functions. You have testing before you deploy, and then once you deploy, before you upgrade, if you're upgradable, make sure you go through those by hand and make sure that everything works, or have some processes already that as soon as you deploy, you run this test straight against mainnet or wherever you are deploying into. Yeah.
Thank you. So on the security side, do you also have some advice you'd like to share with people who are maybe building their first startup, their first protocol?
So from my point of view, I suggest, first of all, to save for an audit. You don't have to get the most expensive one, but don't be cheap about it. It's really something necessary. And secondly, try to optimize your code base so that it is also easily auditable, which is an advantage both for the auditors, but also, I think, for the developing team. And in that sense, I suggest you to use known libraries, use simple patterns, don't do difficult stuff, don't do weird stuff. If you are doing difficult stuff, keep it contained in a single place and be aware that what you're doing is tricky. Don't distribute it over the code base. I would say, the simpler you keep it, and the less likely it is to be buggy.
Can you hear me? Yeah. No? Okay, good. I think looking at what other large teams have done, I mean, the beauty of our space is that most of this stuff is open source. So look at the Sablier code base, look at the Maple Finance code base, look at this protocol code base. Why I mentioned these, for example, is all of them did a very interesting thing that others maybe didn't do. A thing that you're building conceptually, there's a huge chance it's very close to something else that's being built, maybe not the code itself. So you can learn like ways of how to do stuff. One of my favorite documents that is the Yearn War Room or Incident Response Doc. I cannot remember the concrete name of the doc, but they have literally a checklist of, hey, this is, if shit hits the fan, this is what we do without thinking. That is literally something that you can adapt on your own from them, because it's very abstracted away from how Yearn works up until a certain point. So how people do fuzzing, how people do formal verification, how people do all of these things. Basically steal it from them, because it's open source for a reason, so others can build on top of it. So I think that's the correct way to learn yourself, both internally. And then the other thing is, like in this room, you have a couple of security people that I know for a fact that if you message them with a question, they will answer. They won't charge you like $300 an hour. They will gladly help. Now, if you do that consecutively for 10 hours, they probably will say, hey, this is something I charge for. But yeah, I think as someone just starting out, maybe without the budget for these large auditing companies or whatever, that's the first step. You gain some trust, you get the money, and then you go to the auditors who do this, and their existence depends on them doing a good audit. So, yeah.
Thank you. Can people text you for free advice?
No. I mean they can, but it is free advice, so you get what you're going to pay for. Tenderly is basically, there's a joke in the music industry of drummers are musicians' best friends. So in that sense as well, Tenderly is the best friends of security people. So we're not really security people, but we really like talking to them, and they like talking to us. So.
I think probably everybody knows Tenderly already, but can you give us the super quick overview if someone doesn't know who and what Tenderly is?
Smart contract, go fast. No. So full stack infrastructure platform, what does that mean? If you're developing, we have developer tooling. If you're deploying something or testing something, we have both production and testing infrastructure. And then if you get woken up in the middle of the night, it's basically our monitoring stack telling you, hey, you should really check this out. So those are like the three categories. And we're used by a lot of security people in the space, even though we have 0 security products, or like catering to the security stuff itself. So,
thank you. All right, so moving on from the topic of audits, budgets, and so on, talking about oracles, right? Because we have people who are very interested in oracles here, and maybe we can open this topic. Maybe Brenda, do you want to tell us a bit more? What is Tellor? How is it different from other oracles?
Yeah, so Tellor, we're a very pragmatic team. And one of the things that has always been at the top of our priorities is decentralization. So Tellor, the way that it works is anybody can become a data reporter as long as you stake on chain or token. And anybody can come and raise a dispute on the validity of the data that you're providing starting at 10% of the stake. But if they win, they take your whole stake. So that incentivizes people to be looking into the network and keep it clean. For the users, the way that it works is they post a tip on chain, and then a tip is basically a payment on chain that signals that you want your data for a specific value or type of data. And then anybody raises to provide you the data on chain. And then whoever provides it to you, they get to take your payment. And the team, we didn't do an ICO or any of that, so we have a dev share, sort of like Zcash. So we don't get to see any of that, but we provide the protocol for that to happen. And it's completely permissionless. So if you want some really weird data, you can come and ask for it, as long as you provide a full definition that the data reporters feel comfortable with providing the data on chain, then they're not going to be slashed. They're probably going to provide it, or that they're not going to be disputed and then slashed. You don't have to wait for the dispute if you're a user, by the way. You just request it and they get new data if your data was disputed. But everything is on chain and everything is permissionless. The problem, we can go into problems with that, or how that, how the fact that it's permissionless for you to request any type of data can bring lots of troubles to protocols that don't use proper definitions, or that use things with really low liquidity to try and secure things with, really high TVLs. But that's how Tellor works. It's just one of the oracles in the space. We value decentralization more, so we're a little bit slower than if you're more centralized.
So I think, Brad, you experienced some issues with oracles. You kind of saw that there were some, shortcomings, and then you decided for a bit of a creative solution for Venus. Can you tell us more?
So Venus developed an offering called the Resilient Oracle, which basically adds support for multiple price feed oracles at the same time, and use them in a way that gives you fallback and sense checking. And this was just us solving our own problem with the Chainlink Oracle that we experienced a couple years ago, when it effectively just paused in the middle of extreme market conditions, right? And if I learned anything from my time working in banking infrastructure, it's that single point of failures are bad. And effectively all of DeFi is, or at least 90% of it is resting on one Oracle provider. So probably not the best approach. If you look a little deeper into the effectiveness and accuracy of Chainlink, which we're only now starting to develop an empirical picture of what's going on because DeFi is so new. Actually, one recent study showed that of 150 million pricing events over the past 18 months, Chainlink was over one standard deviation inaccurate to about 3% of the time. So about 3% of 150 million is almost 4 million pricing events. So in 18 months, you're pretty wrong 4 million times. That's DeFi right now. And if you don't think that's good enough, well, you're probably right, because to have a nearly 3% margin of error, it would be catastrophic in banking. And so if we want DeFi to be the global financial infrastructure of the world and get it to the billions that everyone always talks about, we need hardened infrastructure. We can't have single points of failure. And until then, everybody's resting effectively on one multi-sig that may have too much control behind Chainlink. So this was a key thing for Venus to solve. We're looking at productizing this for other protocols in case they want a turnkey way of implementing this. In case you think that maybe having your entire protocol rest on Chainlink is also a bad idea. But that's not to say that Chainlink, of course, hasn't been a pioneer that helped us get to where we are. But we just shouldn't put all of our weight on its shoulders.
Interesting, thank you. Pietro, you've been doing a lot of DeFi audits recently. You worked on Euler, you've been working on Curve a lot. So you've seen a lot of oracles and a lot of kind of the pitfalls of using them. Is there some advice you could share, some kind of common traps that you see that people fall in?
Yeah, so both for off-chain oracles, oracles that derive a value off-chain, such as Chainlink, and on-chain oracles, oracles that take their price from pools. I think when implementing a protocol, it is essential not to rely on a too strict definition of price. For example, if you rely on a price to be within 0.1% correct, it's probably going to not go too well for your protocol. If there is some slack between what can happen with price manipulation and the consequences on your protocol, I think that's already a very good idea. What I really liked, for example, in Euler is that they have a liquidation logic based on Dutch auctions, in which if you manage to manipulate a price to make some position liquidable, the profit that you can make is kind of proportional to the manipulation you can put in. And so if you are just barely making the position liquidable, the attacker cannot make any profit. And this is a kind of strong property for a protocol, as opposed to a protocol where I can manipulate the price by 0.1% and get a 10% profit on the position. In general, I would say combining multiple oracles can improve your security. But also you should understand very well what can go wrong when the price returned by the oracle is not behaving as you expect. So you might expect that the oracle will always track correctly the price. This will rarely be the case. Sometimes it will be delayed. It's important to quantify these aspects. Imagine a price drop by 50% in 1 hour. How will your protocol react? These are aspects that relate both to manipulation and to actual market conditions. So I would say it's one of the trickiest aspects of protocol development, and it's something we always take a long time looking into.
So we were talking about kind of when an attack is profitable, right? When is it profitable to manipulate, the custom manipulation, and then how you can make in the attack? And I think when you do an audit, you kind of assume, okay, a certain pool size, but maybe at some point the parameters are going to change. It's going to become cheaper to manipulate, or maybe the pool is going to become bigger, and then there's a bigger reward. So some people say this is where monitoring comes in. But some people also say monitoring is great so that you can get an alert when something is wrong, and then you can look at people emptying your pools. So Bogdan, can you tell us a bit more about kind of monitoring and how this can actually prevent attacks instead of just letting you know that you're getting attacked?
Sure. Although it's very fun at 4 a.m., like eyes all crunchy looking at you losing your money. But I think a lot of people think about monitoring from the perspective of, okay, I deployed something on chain, now I'm going to look how it behaves. That's one thing I want to put as a first statement. I need to cover 3 things to make a concrete statement. The second
His
thing,
compliance officer said so.
second thing is, who here worked in Web 2 before? I need to make a point. Okay, did you integrate with the Stripe API or any external API? Cool, did you monitor the actual API? Like, did you have an agent monitoring their uptime? No, so a fucked up thing in Web3 is that you need to monitor your upstream dependency. So this is what you guys were actually talking about, oracles, is that you kind of have to figure out how someone else's company works to know if your company will work. Because if Stripe is down, we're kind of okay with it, like the payment didn't go through, but here you have like huge liquidations and stuff like that happening. That's the second thing. The third thing is that a lot of people, when talking about monitoring, okay, we have it before deployment, after deployment, but then you also have a thing of, can you look into the future? So because time plays a huge role in these things, especially liquidations and other stuff. Now I can make the concrete statement. A thing I'm trying to advocate to most protocols is a lot of people are monitoring for when stuff happens on chain. So did this liquidation event happen? Did the price oracle update happen? There's another thing that was pioneered initially, I might be mistaken, but they think it is by the Maple Finance team, is something called invariant monitoring. So you can think of it in a similar way of how, I don't know, you do invariant testing with Foundry. The idea behind this is that as a human being, it's much harder for you to figure out when something should happen, when something shouldn't happen, or when the absence of something happening is bad. The idea is that you're much better at figuring out in a concrete point in time, in this case, a block number, in which state your system should be. A very concrete example, let's say that we're building a smart contract that can do tic-tac-toe tournaments. So we know for a fact that the number of started games and finished games cannot be higher or lower than the total number of games on that particular smart contract. So that's our invariant. This is a very plastic and simple example, but this is an invariant check that you could do. Why did I mention all of these things? That is, if you look at your system as a finite state machine and you're actually testing on state transitions or how that state looks, you can suddenly monitor before deploying anything on chain. I'm guessing that's also what you said on when talking about testing Tellor. Before updating it, running tests in CI is basically monitoring when you wrap your head around it. So that's one benefit that you get. The second benefit that you get, and I'm going to shell simulations here a bit from tenderly, but is basically you can do this with Anvil as well. So I don't particularly care. I just hope more people in this space do this. Is basically you can travel forward and backwards in time. So okay, how would have our protocol behaved 10,000 blocks ago, or how will our protocol behave in 1,000 blocks? So you can suddenly do all of these checks even in production. So in 6 blocks, which positions will be liquidated? Let's take all of the positions that are here now, go back in time 6 months, would they have been liquidated or not? And that way, when you're looking at monitoring, it's much more powerful because in that way, you're thinking about how your protocol is going to behave, you're thinking about how your system, the whole state of it, and then suddenly you're not just being woken up 4 a.m. and looking all of the funds being drained, you can actually drain yourself in a simulated environment or as part of your CI/CD pipeline. Whatever. Rent over. I don't have a mic. I cannot drop this. But
Mic drop.
yeah.
Interesting. So I would like to also hear a more concrete example. And Brenda, before the panel, you told me about the Levana example and how they recreated this Black Thursday. Can you tell us a bit more?
Right. So Levana protocol lives in osmosis chain. And one of the things that are popping up, and I'm sure all of you guys know, everybody's building their own chain. There's app chains for this, app chains for that. Hello?
There you
It's making it quite a lot more, it's making it cheaper to cause congestion in chains because transaction costs. Generally, when you build an app chain, you're probably very likely trying to lower your transaction costs, right? So, but anyway, we expand, that's one of our main goals. And what they ended up doing is the attacker ended up sort of recreating Black Thursday by causing a lot of congestion on osmosis chain and only allowing basically
Do you guys,
Oracle updates. Are you
sorry,
following?
can I interrupt
Yeah.
you? Do you guys know what Black Thursday is? Maybe a little primer on Black Thursday?
Okay, yeah. So Black Thursday. So Black Thursday was a mishap on Ethereum, and I'm gonna try. And you guys can correct me if I got any of this wrong, but it was a mishap, and I don't even know what year. And what ended up happening, Ethereum price increased, and there was a big sell-off, and there was a lot of congestion on the chain, and then Maker uses Chainlink as their oracle, but they weren't able to get any updates because of the congestion and the high gas cost on chain. So even if they submitted, it wasn't with enough gas to go through. So this caused eventually an update onto the oracle that was late and actually triggered a bunch of liquidations. Maker has a lot of really good backstops in their system, so they were able to freeze the system and mitigate. They did have liquidations, but not all of them went through because they ended up freezing the system. And this was a mishap. It was something that just happened because of market conditions. Nobody expected that to happen. It still happened. I think it haunts us a little bit. I think for if you've been in the space, that day was kind of like you couldn't really transact on chain, and it was just sort of,
I think
we
it
didn't know
was
what was happening.
March 2020 when COVID was announced, something like that. Then the stock market dropped a lot, and then that kind of, yeah.
Yeah, everything followed. And it just seemed like, but it was a mishap. None of this was malicious. Like, it just happened, and it just sort of triggered events. The congestion, high prices, oracles couldn't update, liquidations, and we just chalked it up. Okay, well, that happened, and that's it. But now with app chains popping up, that incident that was a mishap is actually becoming an attack vector. And it was just tested successfully on Levana protocol on osmosis. And what they did is they caused the congestion on osmosis, and they were only allowing oracle updates whenever the attacker, stopped attacking the chain with their transactions. So it would update, they would take the winning position and take the winnings, and then they would do it. They did it for a few times until I think they froze their system. So.
But probably not remembered as a mishap by the people that got liquidated.
Yeah, but true,
Yeah.
but that was definitely not specifically malicious. Like, it was a market condition, whereas this was somebody set out to attack osmosis chain because it was cheap. It was cheaper to attack it and make money off of it. So as long as the incentive is there for somebody to go and attack your system, they're gonna do it. And if transaction costs are really low, then they can actually create this or do this purposefully. And now we've seen all of these app chains popping up, and this is only, in my perspective, once the cat's out of the bag, you can't put crypto, you can't hide it. This is gonna continue to happen as long as it's profitable.
Thank you. Do you want to add something, or?
I remember it was called the Six Sigma liquidation. There was similar stuff even before app chains, and it was a lot of times market conditions. I remember when Elon Musk tweeted that Tesla won't accept Bitcoin anymore, we started lagging as tenderly on Binance because people started selling off. I don't know what exactly happened, but stuff like that. And I think the more TPS chains that will start popping up, there isn't even, so there's two problems that can happen. So one is the network itself, it being congested. The other one, and this is us as an RPC provider, we see this when you're running nodes, is disk IO, how it's going to behave, because updating state starts being extremely expensive. And for example, now Arbitrum Nova was having issues where the only way to run an Arbitrum Nova node was on a beast of a machine with a local NVMe SSD. By the way, we're in a cloud era, so saying local NVMe SSD is like a very specific requirement. I could go deeper why it was happening, but I think another thing that we're going to see here is chains working on their gas prices and how S-loads, S-stores, and other stuff is going to behave, because it's getting harder and harder to operate nodes. And if we actually do want to keep decentralization, and I mean, even though we're an RPC provider, I do hope that we're going to live in a world where I run a node on my phone. Basically, we need to think about this as well, because it's one thing congesting the whole network, but imagine your DApp is connected, let's say even to Tenderly, and we start lagging against the network, and suddenly you're looking at completely stale data. So not bad data, but stale data. So that's another part of the equation, which I think is very important to think about, completely lower down the stack outside of the smart contracts, outside of the consensus layer and other stuff.
Brad, I think Venus is deployed on several chains. Can you tell us a bit more? What was your decision-making process on which chains you're going to launch, and potentially what security implications there are?
Well, the community is making the decisions, and we go where the community wants, and where that usually tends to be where the capital is and where the action is. But we're a little bit behind with the other lending protocols and the other cadences with new deployments. I think part of that is, well, the community wants to go a lot of places, but let's see how it plays out, if there's any risks that were unforeseen or that were not anticipated that arise with L2s, and with, for example, any chains that might have some congestion, right? Because that could have maybe some spillover effects, like we discussed with Maker a few years ago. We don't want anything like that to happen again, right? So being faster is not always better in DeFi, especially when the entire infrastructure is just a matter of years old and we're scaling it for the first time to tens of billions. Yeah, I think that's generally the philosophy there.
Thank you. One thing that happened recently that's quite interesting, everybody's talking about the Linea incident. Pietro, can you tell us a bit more about what exactly happened?
Yeah. So Velocore is a protocol, a DeFi protocol on Linea, on the Linea chain and on Base, which had received 3 audits, but still there were a couple of bugs left over, and chaining two bugs allowed an exploiter to steal 8.6 million ETH of value. By the way, one of the bugs was caused by some very low impact gas optimization. So they had an unchecked block for arithmetics, which was not needed actually. It was just a gas optimization measure. But on L2, you really don't need to optimize this kind of gas, so don't do that. Take time to make as many checks as you want. Well, so the hack happened, and the Linea team was notified by a monitoring team. I think it was Hexonotes or something like that. They were notified about 10 minutes after the hack happened. They tried to get in contact with Velocore because other pools were still exploitable. They couldn't, and what they decided to do was to stop the sequencer. So Linea is a ZK rollup, which relies on a centralized sequencer and prover. New transactions are processed by this central node and then are published on L1 in batches. If the central node decided to stop, no transaction can go in. So that's what they did. They stopped it for about 1 hour, and then they restarted it after deciding to blacklist the hacker address, so he couldn't put any transactions in anymore. He couldn't bridge out the remaining tokens he had hacked. Meanwhile, he managed to still bridge out 700 ETH. So it opened a big discussion because what is the role of blockchain if everything is just centralized and controlled by the sequencer, if there's arbitrary power to perform censorship? I think it can be a good thing in terms of security, but it can also open the door to possibly some problems in terms of, for example, the role of blockchain as infrastructure. It becomes more vulnerable to political pressure and stuff like that.
I have an unpopular opinion about this. I think what they did made sense, to be completely honest. Now, the reason why, we're still not in a space where, like, nobody's gonna come and play with us in Web3 if every Monday you see millions and millions getting hacked. There is gonna be a point where that happens, but if the whole community thinks, let's say, XYZ chain, we work with so many networks that I cannot use examples of real networks. Let's say Bogdan chain does something extremely fishy and censors a valid transaction, like a very important valid transaction. Nobody's going to use the chain. I mean, right now, even yesterday I talked, the human part of this is governing of if will people go to a particular chain or to use it or not. Once we figure out the decentralized sequencing as a thing, at that point we can talk about, okay, let's build out censorship resistance, etc. The thing that they really like is there is one network that the idea is for the sequencer to be able to very transparently censor transactions. So what does this actually mean is that on the sequencer, you can actually say, for my particular smart contract, I never want more than 1,000 ETH going out of it. And then the sequencer itself won't include transactions at all. So the sequencer will basically simulate the transaction, see that there more than 1,000 ETH is coming out of the smart contract, and just not include the transaction and drop it. And in that way, you can put that under governance, for example. So the DAO of a particular protocol can actually vote and push constraints onto the sequencer of, hey, this is how we want the protocol to behave, because we don't think that there's actually going to be this high of a move of a funds or anything like that. Or we want to block the attacker on the sequencer layer. So you could have a very fast 3-day governance proposal that would block the attacker. But basically, I think that's the way to move forward. Right now, I think they did the correct thing.
Because it's not controversial. I think that's one of
because
it's not controversial.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
But once it does, I think this sets the stage to will we ever decentralize in the name of security? Yeah. And it brings that very up to, and I guess let's talk politics a little bit. Right now, the US, we're going through our election cycle. And every time there's a hack on crypto, no matter how small or big, they take it so that to tell everybody how unsafe it is and how crappy it is and whatever, try and shut us down. And every time something happens, it makes it more and more difficult, at least for us, to operate there. Yeah. But whatever happens there extends to, everybody's watching. Yeah. Everybody's watching. And if there is a choke point that can be used specifically for any government, it's going to be used. So if we could, I understand the development cycle. When we first launched, we had even had a governance thing to upgrade, whatever. But eventually, that is a choke point and an attack. It can be an attack vector, and it's okay, so right now it's not controversial, but then in the future, if it was, who decides and who determines which fork is right? Then you're choosing winners and losers, and who that person is or who that entity is becomes a very, very big deal.
No, I completely agree. I'm just saying gradual decentralization is the point. This is in this current point in time, Linea or saving funds because it's not controversial is the good way to. I think that people are right now, currently on May 5th, are giving them too much of a tough time for what they did. If they continue doing it, yes, but then also everybody's going to bridge out to Linea and not use it. At least I hope, in that case. So. But I agree with you, yeah.
So I'm soon going to ask you for a short closing statement, so if you want to start thinking about that, and then we're going to go for the Q&A. But I just wanted to add something on this. I think it's also, it increases the responsibility of the team, because now if the team can pause transactions and can hold the chain when they judge that it's needed, then do they become liable for all the other transactions that could be illegal that they haven't censored? And typically in the Tornado Cash case, this was one of the arguments put forward by the defense, is that they could not halt the transactions. They didn't have this control over the protocol. And then it's kind of taking this argument on the other side. So yeah, I think it's interesting as well. All right, that was my stalling for your closing statement. Who wants to start?
I started with the intro. I'm going to go last.
Okay.
Everybody's looking at me, so I guess I'll talk. DeFi is really hard, and it doesn't come down to audits alone, right? DeFi is operating at the intersection of financial risk and immutability risk. It's like we're launching a bank, something with bank-type capabilities into space. If the satellite goes bad, you're not going to go up to space to try and fix it, right? So that's why there's so much pressure to get it right the first time. And that's not easy. And people don't invest enough resources in the get-go to make it right. And so what happens is people get wrecked and continually, year after year. And the number of exploits and the number of lossage actually increased from 2022 to 2023. So we're not doing enough to abate the issues because they're multidimensional and it's complicated. But I think that there needs to be more at various levels of our industry to work the problem, like auditors and monitoring, and all this is just like scratching the surface. We have to come together. We have to have security consortia. We have to have some types of not just best practices, but grading that everybody agrees on. That doesn't come from one auditor, but that everybody can say, around the world, yes, this is a way to determine if a protocol is worth putting capital into, because otherwise people are just going to be throwing money everywhere, recklessly, getting wrecked, like in Pump.Fun or what have you, $80 million gone the next day, like it's nothing, and it's a lot of money. So I hope that we figure out new ways and new models and new frameworks for advancing security across all these dimensions. Because we should be able to say together 1 year that we had no seven-figure lossage due to exploits. That would be something. I don't know when it's going to happen, but we need to get there.
It would be amazing. DeFi is really hard. And earlier I heard a talk where they said, when and I forget who it was, but they said something like, well, if somebody uses Chainlink, it's sort of like a signal like that, it's fine because everybody uses it. I disagreed with that point because not everything should be under one thing, but also just because everybody's trying to do DeFi really, really fast, it doesn't mean that it's fine. Just do it faster. Maker has grown to be one of the biggest players in the space, and they used to, at least, I don't know about now because I haven't looked into protocol for a bit, but at the beginning, they took an hour before they actually used their Oracle price. If they can wait an hour, I think if you're building something, wait the hour. Make sure that you don't lose funds, don't get hacked. Make sure that you grow to be that big before you do anything stupid. And it's a matter of timing. Like sometimes a lot of these hacks, I went back and actually looked at Rect and listed all of the hacks for 2023. Flash loans were like the biggest thing that is used to do asset manipulation to manipulate the Oracle. And it's such a well-known attack that it was done too many times. At least once a month, somebody got hacked in 2023 through that same attack recipe. It's like, learn from our mistakes and take it slow. It's okay. You can still calculate who's going to win and who's going to lose and just freeze it or make it slow to withdraw, and that will take you a long way for being able to actually do something if you get attacked. But that's it.
So I think Oracle are a good examples where code correctness, which is something that audits and formal verification can address, and monitoring really need to work in concert. we rely on oracles to, for example, create lending markets, but the safety of the oracle depends on the capital required for manipulation. Manipulation is always possible. The only variable is the cost and the profit that can be derived from the manipulation. So it's not an immutable parameter, it's something that evolves over time, and it's often very hard to quantify. And this is something that protocol need to take a step back about and realize their security depends on understanding this. And this is a bit peculiar for every protocol, but yeah, understanding the cost of manipulation and the consequences is something that's very important and very often overseen by especially lending protocols, which assume the oracle price is correct for whatever amount, pool size, whatever amount of collateral, while there can be slippage, there can be illiquid markets. This kind of thing will influence the effectiveness of price manipulation.
Just a quick comment on that. As a protocol, if you don't understand or don't know the cost to hack or to attack your protocol, you need to do that on a periodic basis. And if you don't, trust me, an attacker will calculate it for you, and it'll be too late. So.
Read what others have done, because you're literally probably not the first one trying to tackle an issue that you're doing. One statement, second statement, don't use the space being young as an excuse to make toys.
And maybe my last words, we're ChainSecurity. We do smart contract audits. If you're looking for an audit, please come to me. And we've been distributing bugs. If you guys are hungry and you want some nice snacks, we have insects for you. All right, so do we have questions from the audience? Yes, over there. Can we give him a mic? One question? The only question.
No pressure.
Should I give it to? I can go. Yeah?
Erring on the side of action.
Yeah, thank you for the panel. So we've heard so many times about audits. So excluding audits, what's the second security activity you would use as protocol, or you would recommend to protocols?
I would say active transaction monitoring, so you can see what's happening economically and financially, and try and anticipate something. You know, the lead time is minutes, but having this gives lending protocols the opportunity to put some circuit breaker in place when circuit breakers are reliable enough or good enough that the protocol feels comfortable to implement them.
Don't use testnets. I think testnets should die for smart contract development. They should just be for consensus testing. Use tools. I am shilling tangibly, but there's open source variants as well. Use tools that let you actually test on production data.
Keep thinking about invariants in your protocol and keep tests, like monitoring them on chain, and also have a big bug bounty, which will attract hopefully eyes. Yes, a big one though.
Internally, ongoing checks within your own team. Nobody knows your protocol better than you and what the weaknesses of it. Make sure that you understand them. Make sure that you do anything to track them, or anything that you can track as a prerequisite before something big happens. Like an example is like for us, we monitor how much our bridges, basically bridges that bridge our token. Why? Because before somebody goes and tries to take over our system, they have to bridge. So if we can catch them there, then we can actually do something versus versus just monitoring when somebody starts staking like 50% of or trying to take over the network. So, yeah, internally.
Thank you. We don't have time for more questions, right? All right, thank you so much, guys. Thanks.